You are far from your post, Inquisitor. What brings you here? That woman sought only to destroy the foundations of peace and civility that my people sacrificed everything to build. We are in a sanctum holy to Utica. There are others like it in service to the other gods. I come here often to pray for her counsel, and in this space I may be assured that she hears me. It has many uses, but its purpose is to bring structure to the chaos that surrounds it. They are monuments to Utica's greatest servants among my people. I hope to join them myself one day, but my work is not yet complete. The Inquisition was based on the need to cut the flesh from a rotting wound. What is a god? A higher power? A rewarder of good deeds and punisher of the wicked? Something men can turn to in their darkest moments when their days seem only like bridges from one tragedy to the next. Our gods are all these things. We are in a sacred place within earshot of the gods themselves. This is not the time. You've been through much these past few months. You will return home and you will rest. When you feel you have recovered, you may rejoin us at the trials. The Inquisition is far from over, and I will have need of you. There are many who continue to spread the lies of the apostate. The Inquisition will not end until we have pronounced judgment on all of them. How did you find it? Another in a string of acts of petty defiance. For all her knowledge, she always preferred spite over reason. Then she should have obeyed. I ask one thing of all my followers. She was incapable. A waste of rare talent and intellect. What of your cohorts, then? They have followed you to their deaths. Is it loyalty that brings them here? Or is it, as my agents suggest, that they have no direction of their own? You worshipped Aethys, did you not?
Your spies are good. What gave me away? The cape?
Yet when your god needed you the most, you chose your country.
We were being invaded. Not by anyone who was acting like a god.
Then I should think your hometown gave you a hero's welcome when you returned.
They made cake. Hard to blame people for losing faith when it's the gods who are misbehaving.
The gods argue over how best to prevent Kith society from destroying itself. These disruptions would not be necessary were mortal instinct not so diseased. You built a weapon that delivered exactly as promised.
I served my goddess as you did yours.
Yet the other builders were slain, 11 of a dozen. Why not you? Were you somehow different? Redeemable in your god's sight?
There was a message there, whether she meant it or not.
Or was it merely that your goddess wanted you dead as well? And your delusions of importance prevented you from seeing the obvious.
A whore's beguiling charms, nothing more. But the spell's broke now, Thaos. The trial's over. I know friend from foe. And I've come here now to see a foe repaid.
You were able to destroy a god because another god wished it. Without her hand to guide you, you could not strike at a god any more than you could strike the sky. You are impotent, and not just from the pox. I understand your Duke's bells gave you a mission.
Their orders do not absolve me of my greater responsibility to the safety and well-being of the Republics.
Yet you disobeyed. Something you already have a reputation for. They will know, of course. If it had been for a worthy cause, they might have forgiven you. But I don't see them pursuing animancy after seeing what it's done here.
The parents scold, but the children are safe. Whether animancy research continues in the Republics or not, they will survive. For now, that's enough. In any case, I wouldn't be so smug about my fate, Thaos. I imagine Woodica responds to disappointment much more severely than even my dukes.
State your name and purpose, young acolyte.
My name belonged to the gods and my hand to their service. No more.
You serve none but yourself. Without contact with your order, you can have no higher purpose. Only the base concerns of the flesh. You have cast yourself from our ranks.
And I should have done it years before. I'd rather live in uncertainty than servitude.
And that uncertainty would lead you where it leads everyone. To doubt, to emptiness, to the many cruelties inspired by disbelief. You will have to forgive your Grandmaster for remaining skeptical of his initiate's choices. You are here because you are lost. The gods cannot reach everyone, I'm afraid. May you fare better in your next lives. I gather you have had your soul awakened. Why else would you shadow my footsteps like some stray mongrel? You think I have something to offer you, but our business was concluded long ago. I answered your questions once. That your soul is not fit to accept the answers is of little concern to me. I lied to no one. Not to you, not to anyone. The gods are real. They are everything we need them to be, and the world is better for it. The heart of this country has skipped a beat. Nothing more. I have done far worse. I plunged the peaceful kingdom of Thaos into civil war. I slew the monarch of Desantio, whose people never knew hardship under his rule, and replaced him with a cruel despot who brought them to ruin. When plague arrived at the great city of Arborensis, I saw to it that the cure did not. They piled their dead outside the city in heaps that rose above their walls. That's where you are mistaken. There was a time, back when your soul was still a shapeless mist, when the world believed only in false gods. Thousands of them. Gods that told them to take slaves. Gods that told them to make war upon their neighbors and devour the slain. Gods that told them to burn their children alive and cover themselves in the ashes as a sign of their faith. But all that changed when they learned of the true gods. Our gods. All those misshapen, bestial instincts melted beneath the radiance of our god's majesty. You could see it in their eyes. That dull emptiness replaced with the glimmer of a kindled spark. There is no false hope. Only hope for things that never come. Have you imagined this existence? The one the apostate would have created? We are not all so virtuous as she. Without our gods, the most wicked, the most tyrannical, they would take that power for themselves. But more than that, it would be a hollow existence. All mysteries forever unanswered. All purposes constructed from meaninglessness. No endings to bring closure. Only a wheel, turning without mercy, grinding our spirits to dust. It is the least of all possible costs. Are you so dense as to think a faithless world would not be ridden with calamity? All I have seen, the millennia of experience. I will not be dissuaded from this course. This is the only way. You have not thought this through. There is no leaving this place for you. I allowed it once, but you have made it all too clear what a mistake my mercy was. With your soul and thousands of others, I will see this world purged of its suffering. Hear me, Woodica. Your servant calls for aid. Roak 10!
Ready when you are.
Northern roar!
Watch it.
I'm ready.
Oh, yes. Anna.
starting to miss my neighbors.
In his own way, Thaos must have truly believed he was caring for the people of Eora, protecting them from themselves. A shame his soul won't have a chance to reflect on his errors before it enters the wheel.
Some point, you have to look at the things your god is telling you to do, and ask yourself if it's worth it.
He spent his lives, more than any of us will ever know. For what? Binding the world to a lie. Could a man like that ever be redeemed?
You've let him off too easily, Watcher. I would have left such scars on his soul that he'd have begged escape from the wheel's turn.
Perhaps this is the best place in the world for Thaos. Somewhere he can't cause further harm. Still, you eventually found the Ovara. What is a few thousand years to someone like him?
Thaos, he had hold of your soul from a long time back, seems like. You get what you needed from him? Not many can say that these days. Not with the gods using the world to settle their problems. You'll be feeling better soon then. Good. That's real good. You got it figured out what you're going to do about all that? Got a lot of people out there thinking they've been abandoned by their gods. There's not much that'll put the fear in you more than that. You can take my word for it. If it was in my power, and I know it's not, but if it was, I'd find a way to give them the courage to face it. Not because they think there's some god looking out for them, but because they've just got it in them. And after what you've been through, though, I'm sure you got your own ideas. Better make it good.
So much for Thaos, then. Now you have a chance to set things right, back to the proper order of things. It will take the Deerwood generations to recover, but at least these souls will find their way back to the wheel, as it should be.
Astounding. I always knew the Leaden Key stood for something big, but I didn't quite realize what I'd gotten myself into. And now, you're in the middle of something even bigger. With a decision that will affect millions. But even if you send the souls somewhere specific now, who knows what the next turn of the wheel will make of them? We can't really control what happens to them. Nor should we try. I had to see the monster Thaos had become to realize that. It's your decision, of course. And whatever you decide, I'm glad our paths crossed in Gilded Vale.
Ah, the end of the road greets us at last. You fared well, Watcher. Better than any Watcher has right to. Seems you were a field in need of a flames cleansing. But with that trial's end, a new one begins. A god's trial. And I will stand in judgment without mercy.
What is it?
I have observed you, Watcher. The way you handled that noble girl in Deerford, delivering an idol effigy to her uncle. A most careful scheme. You have labored at the pleasure of others. That shriveled hag in Hadrit House. Those preening soldiers with more taste for silk than steel. The wretched tribesmen playing out their fantasies of grandeur. And then you cowered and knelt before the gods themselves, begging one paltry favor and receiving riddles and visions in response. And now the gods give you orders and commands, even while you set out to fix what they cannot. Yet what have they offered you? The exiled queen is not an ungrateful patron. Finish the work Thaos began. Strengthen Woodica with these souls and allow her to become the most powerful of all the gods, with you as her favorite. You say that now, but when you're standing in front of the machine, considering the lifetimes and the powers that await you, we'll see what you do.
At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Thaos used to enter Sun and Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Thaos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Deerwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the souls diverted by Thaos were guided back to the vessels originally meant for them. For the first time,
parents of hollow-born children woke to the cries of their infants and looked into their eyes to see them staring back. People fell to their knees where they stood, thanking Helia or Mogren or even Aethys for their forgiveness of whatever guilt they felt they bore. But for all the relief that had come to some parents, others only found new grief. For many thousands of Hollowborn had died during Wydwin's legacy, many by their parents' own hands. For those children, there would be no homecoming. Yet the last Hollow birth was in the past now, and those parents willing to risk trying for a new child were frequently rewarded, often with twins. Many felt they saw Helia's hand in it, and the year would be remembered as the year of Helia's splendor. Lord Radric's zeal had brought him back to life once, but it would not do so again. Radric's destruction at your hands spelled the end of his suffocating rule over Gilded Vale and the surrounding area. In his absence, the village prospered, becoming a popular destination for new settlers anxious to leave Defiance Bay after the riots. Without a nearby ruler, it also grew more wild, with many settlers moving on as soon as they'd arrived, turned off by lawlessness that was excessive even by Deerwooden standards. Nevertheless, despite the challenges of living there, Gilded Vale had survived, and would continue to survive for the foreseeable future. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wolfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, the streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But order was soon re-established by the Knights of the Crucible, who, despite their depleted numbers, had gained favor in the public eye for their role in unraveling Wydwin's legacy. They were quickly reinforced by returning forces from Fleetbreaker Castle. Having seen both the ills and the promise of animancy, internally the Knights quietly began a more cautious exploration of the new science. Depleted in numbers but bolstered by their newly forged stock of soul-augmented weaponry and a small contingent of forged knights, the Knights of the Crucible would soon become an order few in Defiance Bay would dare to cross. But the opportunity to build upon their newfound power proved too great a temptation for the High Justice. What was at first a measured approach to animancy soon gave way to a rapid buildup of armaments. The High Justice would eventually seize control of the city for his order and place Defiance Bay under indefinite martial law. Though the machine atop Ter Noaneth had been disabled, it had not seen its last use. Heritage Hill was rebuilt, and no sooner had the first families moved in to resettle the district than members of the Leaden Key, acting under standing orders from their Grand Master, climbed the tower and reactivated the machine. The initiates slew a handful of the new settlers under cover of night, and watched as history repeated itself, the victims reanimating and devouring the survivors. After this second incident, the district would remain abandoned. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay. But those who had escaped the melee and the palace hearings remembered the testimonies of the strange guest who had shown up that day and absolved animancy, implicating the Leaden Key instead. The rumor spread quickly, and soon the popular belief was that the assassin had been a Leaden Key spy. When the legacy had lifted, people came to see it not as a sign that the riots had been according to the god's wishes, as Thaos had hoped, but as a confirmation that animancy had never been the source of the problem in the first place. Deerwoodens instead convinced themselves that the riots had somehow purged Defiance Bay of Leaden Key spies, and that the end of Wydwin's legacy was their well-deserved reward. The rage against animancers was quickly forgotten, and those who had survived were permitted to return to Brackenbury Sanitarium and rebuild it so they might resume their studies. In the town of Deerford, an underground cult dedicated to Scan insinuated itself into the town's institutions. It became a popular travel destination for the wealthy, who were actively courted by the town's leadership. But few who visited the town would ever return, as they soon found their fortunes plummeting and their reputations destroyed by their own kin. The fortress of Cadnua emerged as a bastion of security in the midst of an untamed land, becoming the envy of every thane and earl in Deerwood. Legend grew over time of its impregnability, and stories of formidable invaders easily scattered by the keep's defenses became popular around the hearths of Deerwoodinians. Likewise, it also became a beacon to travelers, merchants, and visiting dignitaries alike. Reputed as the finest fortress in all Deerwood, people would journey from near and distant lands alike to experience its fabled hospitality and grandeur. The Audra dragon known as the Master Below, her soul now housed in the body of the huntress Fallen Roet, passed out of Deerwood in relative anonymity, her final destination unknown, even to herself. She was last seen in the port town of Rhodes End, boarding a ship, an Audra talisman glowing about her neck. Palagina had gone against the Duke Spell's orders by inventing a new trade arrangement with the Anamenfath to accommodate the recovering Deerwooden market. With the Deerwood's people still weakened by Weidman's legacy, the Valian republics easily pushed their would-be competitors out of the market. For her outrageous insubordination and audacity, Palagina was banished from the republics. She traveled north in the Eastern Reach, avoiding Valian ports and entering the ranks of the kind wayfarers. Despite her bravery and dedication to those in her care, her strange appearance made her feel like an outsider wherever she went. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Still most comfortable far from cities, he settled in Deerford, which, like many towns in the Deerwood, was beginning the slow process of rebuilding. Believing now that it was the obligation of Kith to be the leaders their gods had not, Adair was soon named mayor of the town, and under his guidance, Deerford soon began to prosper. He expelled the last of the Scanites from the area and drew new settlers with the offer of land, a trick he had learned from someone he otherwise preferred to forget. With each passing day, Deerford would come to more closely resemble the Gilded Vale of Adair's childhood, the one worthy of its name. When the dust settled in sun and shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Thaos Ixarchanon, his former master. He saw where the Grand Master had gone wrong and what would be required to undo the harm Thaos had wrought. With a flick of his wrist, he burned Thaos's robe, headdress, and every other symbol of the man's power. Never again, he vowed, should Kith live in fear and blind obedience to an authority they did not understand. Armed with the knowledge and courage he had gained on his journeys with the Watcher, he set out on the long and lonely task of dismantling the Leaden Key. With both their aims fulfilled, Kanarua bid the Watcher farewell and sailed back to his beloved Rawatai. There, he reported on his findings to the Lore College. Kana spoke of the Engwithan people, describing both their vile experiments and their inspiring accomplishments. He spoke too of the destruction of the tablet by the Leaden Key and the group's efforts to erase the Engwithan legacy from the world. Both inspiration and cautionary tales, he said, could be found in the world beyond Rawatai's borders. Kana urged his people to continue to pursue knowledge abroad so that the lessons found there might benefit Tekoa. Kana's inability to prove his theory of Engwithan influence diminished his academic standing, but his passion drew much interest from those less concerned with degrees. Kana swiftly became an influential figure in the move toward a more collaborative approach to expansion on the northern continent. In his personal life, he came to enjoy the reputation of an affable eccentric, willing to share grand and impossible secrets, along with a drink and a song. With Thaos defeated and the souls released from sun and shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Deerwood. The grieving mother sought a place where she might do penance for the birthing bell. She returned to Deerford, where, to the astonishment of the villagers, she delivered the first healthy child in over a decade. She remained there, and with each new birth, she saw a measure of hope restored to the Deerwood and a measure of grace for her own troubled past. Durrance continued to blame Woodica for the atrocities of the Saints' War. Believing Magrin to have been a pawn in the machinations of the Queen that was, and feeling that Thaos's expulsion had been a step towards reconciliation with his goddess, Durrance tried for a time to reopen communication with her. When only silence came, he took it as a condemnation of his continued existence. Ultimately, he built a pyre and threw himself upon it, using his own shattered staff as kindling. After 5 years of searching for Persoc, Sagani's 4-month journey home felt longer still. The Deerwood, Aer Glonfoth, the Valian Republics became places on a map, endless expanses of green between her and Nasitok. Her homecoming was celebrated by all of Masuk, yet it was the reunion with Kalu and their children that truly brought her joy. She relinquished her role in the long hunts, and ever after, she and Itumak spent their days working in the village and their nights at her hearth. She watched her own children and their children grow and thrive. When she finally passed, she lay surrounded by the affection and tears of 5 generations. For you, the death of Thaos brought an end to your waking visions and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead.